friends, welcome to another Sunday casual garden stroll. As you can tell, we're standing in my kitchen, which means this isn't much of a garden stroll. Instead of that usual video that I do, today I thought I would answer some of the questions that I get asked the most often. I went through a lot of videos and Instagram comments and things and pulled a list of the things that I'm asked the most and thought I would address those questions today because honestly, there's not a lot to show you in the garden right now. So I live in southeastern Wisconsin, zone 6A, where it has not been really zone 6A temperatures recently. And it's actually nicer in our garden than it probably is in many of yours today. We're nipping at 20 degrees above zero, which is certainly the high for the last, I don't know, week and a half, 2 weeks. I don't know. I've lost track. But there's not much to show because we walked around last weekend and very little has changed since then. So I thought we would address some questions instead. I know that many of you are experiencing weather that is not at all typical for your area, and my sympathies are with you. I don't love the cold weather either, and especially when it just goes on and on. I kind of mind a little burst of cold. That's normal, right? But when it just goes on and on and on, it gets quite tiring. But many of you are dealing with serious ice. I'm looking at you, Tennessee. Holy smokes. Steve at Natchez Glen. Boy, I've been watching what's happening there. It's crazy what happened there. But many other places as well. And I know that many of you southernish gardeners are experiencing temperatures that you should not be seeing. So I feel you all. And honestly, I mean, we're set up for cold and bad weather up here in the north. I know down there you guys don't even have the infrastructure to really handle those things. So be safe, be careful, hang in there. You know, one of the questions actually that I do get a lot is how to manage cold in your garden. And my answer for that is much different for my area than it will be for yours. Highly recommend checking out Jim Putnam's channel. He's been doing a couple of videos on how to deal with this cold when it comes, and he's always such good advice. He's in North Carolina. So if you're a bit more southern, a bit warmer zone, he's got great advice on how to handle that. When you're in the north up here, you know, consider that most of our plants and most of our gardens are meant to, I mean, assuming you're planting at all appropriately for your area, most of our plants are meant to be able to handle this kind of thing. And honestly, you know, most of what you can do to protect your garden, you hopefully did, you know, a month ago or more. Although you saw last weekend in the garden stroll, I grabbed some evergreen boughs and I did put that over some of the questionably hardy things in my garden. It's probably too late. But extended cold is different from one big cold shot, so I thought it was worth giving a try anyway. So that is something you can still do if you still feel like going out there. For the most part, though, you know, the jig's kind of up. What's going to happen is going to happen, and you have to sort of, you know, put yourself in that Zen state and say, we'll see what spring brings. In years with this kind of cold, particularly when we don't have a ton of snow on the ground, I know that I will lose some plants. And it is always a little interesting to me what plants I lose. I remember I had a clematis called, it was Recta Pamela, super hardy clematis, was growing so well in my garden. We had, I think this was 2019 actually, which is the last time we've experienced extended temperatures in this kind of cold range. And that plant never came back. And it was just super healthy, I thought, and hardy, and everything was great. And it didn't come back. You know, sometimes plants don't come back because there are additional stresses. I mean, maybe there was a vole or something eating the roots. Maybe that spot was particularly dry or particularly wet going into winter. There's usually a lot of factors, not just a cold shot, that affects the things that we keep and we lose. So at this point, there's probably not a lot you can do but cross your fingers and wait to see what happens in spring. And if you do lose something, look at it as an opportunity to start fresh with something else, or maybe just replace what you lost if you really, really, really love that plant, or rethink, some things in your garden. Okay, that was sort of one of the questions that I had on the list, and it is one that I get a lot. This time of year, one of the most common questions I get is when to start seeds. And the whole growing from seed thing is completely overwhelming when you're first starting. The key thing that we base most of our seeds starting off of is your last frost date. So the first thing you need to do is go look up what your last frost date is. Your last frost date will be specific to your zip code, not your growing zone, because growing zones can have very different last frost dates. And you want to go look at a couple of sources, and if you can find, NOAA doesn't seem to have this information as readily accessible as it used to, if they even have it at all. But NOAA used to have a great chart of this that really got into detail. What was nice about those NOAA ones is that they gave you a percentage of this being your last frost date. A lot of times when you look up last frost date, I think you're getting the 100% last frost date or the 90% last frost date, meaning 90% of the time there will not be a frost after that. But those NOAA dates, and I'm not sure if there's another source for these now, would have 30, 50, 70, 90% last frost. So based on average date, based on the past, what percent chance is there of getting a frost after that date? And personally, I think you develop a little bit of a feel after a while for your area. So I think 90th percentile is probably a good place to start, but I will often work off of a 70th percentile. It also depends on your microclimate. 5 miles away from you within your same zip code might be a completely different scenario than you have. So basically, this comes down to a little bit of a gamble. Started growing seeds. I used to work off a last frost date of May 14th. And like everything else, that's been changing. Last year it was May 5th for me. So, feel free to change up what you see from there, but that's kind of how you work back from. And then most seed packets will say start X number of weeks before your last frost. Since I grow the same plants from seed year after year after year, you do develop a feel for, and make some notes if you think of it, you do develop a feel for what you can push earlier or what you started way too early. I've realized that I can start sweet peas much earlier than I was. Last year I did that and it worked out great. I will have to look at what that date was where I made a note and do that again, because it was pretty perfect timing last year. Because sweet peas can go out before your last frost. They can handle quite a bit of cold. On the other hand, I find that things like amaranth and celosia, there is zero benefit to trying to push those early, because those are very crabby with any kind of cold temperatures. They are just gonna, if you get them germinated, they're just gonna stop growing. One thing I've learned about growing from seed is that if there is a pause in the plant's development, it usually sets them back farther than that pause took. So that pause could be caused by growing out of the space it's in and being a little cramped. Some seedlings really, really resent being cramped in a pot. If it gets too cold for a period of time and you have to hold them too long, that even if you're only holding them for an extra week, it might set that plant's growth development back 2 or 3 weeks. So you get a feel for this, and honestly, at the end of the day, some of it's just luck. Some of it's just trying it, seeing what happens, and going with your gut from there. And not every year is going to be perfect, and you just have to kind of roll with it and do your best. Next question I tend to get at this time of year is when to do spring cleanup. This is assuming that you haven't cleaned up your whole garden in fall, which honestly I see very few people doing anymore, which I personally think is great, but this is the decision you have to make for yourself. It's a little controversial. It shouldn't be controversial. Just do what's right for your schedule and your garden. There are a ton of benefits to not cleaning up your garden in fall. The key one for me, honestly, to leave things standing is something to look at in my garden. If you live in the northern area, you know that our gardens are just vast swaths of gray and brown and white, basically. The more brown I can have with some texture, I'll take it. Because if you squint, brown kind of looks like gold a little bit. I'm looking out at my limelight hydrangea blooms right now, which are beautiful. I think they're absolutely beautiful. Are they beauty I would want to see in summer? No, because we have more options in summer. But you take what you can get and you find beauty in what you can. So for me, that's the number one reason. My number two reason is that I am dead tired in fall. I am not interested in doing anything more that I don't have to do in fall. Also, I find cleanup to be significantly easier come spring because everything is lighter. And for the most part, for a good part, about at least half of my garden, if not more, I just do chop and drop. So I just go in there and chop it all back and let it lay right there. I don't even move it out. For the things that I do need to move out, they are dried up sticks, and you can get way more in a wheelbarrow. It's very light. It's a much easier material to work with than the fully hydrated material that you would pull out in spring. So in fall. So this is up to you. You get to do what you want. The only kind of measure that I think you need to pay attention to is if you grow ornamental grasses, watch your ornamental grasses. Those are often one of the first things to start putting on some growth, and especially if you're doing chop and drop. It's pretty important to get the old foliage out of there before that new foliage starts, because if you cut back the new foliage, it's not going to grow back. You're going to have those cut off tips on it. So that's sort of one that you have to pay attention to. And then you also have to be careful with some things like, for instance, sedums, stone crops, which there's a new botanical name for that type, like autumn joy, and I can't tell you what it is right now. But those you probably already see. I mean, I see new growth coming in fall on those. So you just have to be a little careful when you're cutting those things back. Some places like Lurie Garden have started doing tiered cutbacks. So they will go through and cut back, say, all the ornamental grasses. But they'll leave everything with a hollow stem stand, well into when other things are growing, and then do hand cutbacks of those things, because those are the things that tend to overwinter insects quite a bit. A lot of insects go in those hollow stems. So don't feel like you got to start in one corner and do the whole thing at one time. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a decision that works for your schedule and your garden. And honestly, there's a certain amount of what are you willing to put up with? One example, I would say, of an excellent example of doing a specified cutback is Austin Eichheit designs some of the gardens at Millennium Park in Chicago. And he does this shady hillside, and he puts in just an absolute amazing array of bulbs. I will, if I can grab a photo to put in here, from one of Austin's Instagram posts, I will put it in for you. He has decided he's got Japanese forest grass, Hacklencloa, growing throughout this whole area. And he leaves the Hacklencloa stand so that the bulbs come up through it. Now you can do this with Hacklencloa because it's a warm season grass. So it starts a little bit later, and it's easier to cut back. It's pretty easy to cut back by hand. I also do it with a string trimmer, so it's very easy to do that way too. But the garden display is so much better with those bulbs coming up and all that Hacklencloa that it would be far less if you didn't leave that grass standing. So there's many reasons you might do this tiered approach. At the end of the day, I choose what's right for me. You got to choose what's right for you. I guess I never answered this specific question. March, usually. I usually do it in March. If March is cold, sometimes we get snowstorms even late in March. I'll wait till April. April's just fine too. It kind of depends on how nice the weather is and if I want to be outside doing it or not. All right, this is a question I get from my northern gardening friends. What are gardening jobs that you can do in winter? Well, this is going to be a really obnoxious answer, but one of, I think, your gardening jobs that you should do in winter, and certainly one that I do, is take a little bit of time to like relax a little and like refill your garden inspiration cup. Because I think northern gardeners operate differently from southern gardeners who can garden pretty much year round. I think gardeners who can garden year round, like all the things they do in their gardens is spread out over maybe 10 months or 12 months. In the north, we pack all that into 6 months or less. And it's the same amount of work. We're all doing the same amount of work. It's just that we have a much shorter time to do it. So I don't have to tell you, it's a really, really, really busy time. And so I think a lot of gardeners, and certainly myself, we tend to work ourselves to the bone in the garden during that time. And so we really do need a time to decompress and just like take it a little easy. So that, I consider that to be one of your jobs. If you garden a place where you can't garden year round, one of your jobs needs to be to just take a break from your garden so that you still love it when you get back to it. Right now is a great time to be pruning on trees and shrubs that don't flower on old wood. And you can extend that for some shrubs. Like I typically do my shrub pruning, for instance, on my panicle hydrangeas. I'll do that in March. But you can do it before that too, whatever. I mean, they're very adaptable things. But pruning is a really good thing to be doing at this time of year in your garden, assuming the weather is cooperating with you. A very good time to be analyzing your own garden in terms of what's working and what's not. It's interesting to look at photos of the garden and then look at that in winter, and I mean photos of the garden in summer, and then look at it in person in winter, because it's maybe the only time that you get a chance to sort of balance the two, because we don't want gardens that only look good in summer and we don't want gardens that only look good in winter. So sometimes you can kind of point out things where you might need something a little bit different there, or you might want to at least start thinking that direction. Obviously, we've already addressed seed starting, which is something that we're sort of getting to that point. When it comes to seed starting, I didn't mention this during the seed starting question. When it comes to seed starting, one of the things that factors in when I start seeds is my schedule, because once you have seeds going, you either can't leave or you need to hire a seed babysitter. So if you are not going to be around, maybe hold off on starting your seeds, because that's where you can end up in that situation where something goes awry and you end up starting all over again, or your seeds get a big setback because you weren't there to take care of them during that time. So seed starting, if you're going to be around. And lastly, tool cleaning and sharpening. I'm not great about doing this, to be honest, and I always regret it in the years that I don't do it. So like last year, I did not do all my long-handled tools. Everything got sharpening, but I didn't do any treatments on any of my handles. I really love to give my handles, like my wood handles, a good scrub and a good cleaning, and then a little linseed oil to keep them nice and hydrated. It's just so nice to start the gardening season off with a organized area full of gardening tools that are ready to be used. Another question I get asked often, especially when we have more people sending in their inspirational gardens via the postcard project, where people share what gardens they visited and what inspired them there. Question I get is, what are the best gardens to visit? Well, I have visited a lot of gardens, and I have not even scratched the surface of the great gardens in this world that need to be visited. And I can't talk about the gardens I haven't been in, you know? So I don't know what I'm missing out. What I will say is that every garden you visit is worth visiting, because there's always a takeaway. So just to give you a couple of examples. Well, I talk about Chanticleer in Pennsylvania all the time. Chanticleer is a sort of transformational garden for me. It is a garden that has informed my personal garden area and the way I garden and the way I look at gardens more than any other garden that I have visited. But that is sort of a personal taste thing. Longwood is very close to there, and Longwood to me is a very aspirational garden. And while I love looking at it because it's beautiful, there are far fewer things that I take away from Longwood and say, oh, I want to implement that in my garden. Because it just isn't, a lot of things that happen in Longwood are just not my personal style. That doesn't mean that I don't think they're beautiful and I don't appreciate them, because I do. I will go there all the time. I would never go to that part of the country and not see both Chanticleer and Longwood in the same visit. It's just that Chanticleer meshes more with what I like in my own space. So therefore, I find that to be very informative, and I find Longwood to be sort of aspirational, enjoy this beautiful garden kind of thing. Much like, if I go to a garden in the South, occasionally I will find a way something is designed, and I love it. And so what I can do is I can break that down and analyze that into, why do I like this, and how do I apply the plants that I'm seeing here? How do I translate that into plants that will grow in my garden? But also I like to go to gardens because they're just beautiful to be in, and it's restful and wonderful to be in any garden. Another garden in that Pennsylvania area is Stoneleigh, which I have visited twice. And the first time I visited, it was only 1 year old. And the second time I went back, 4 years old or 4 years later or something like that. And it is a really interesting garden to me. It's much smaller than Longwood and Chanticleer. Obviously, it's a totally different garden. There's no relation there. You can't compare apples and oranges. But I find I would tell people to go to Stoneleigh because it's a very restful experience, and I actually think it's better for having visited those other two gardens in the same trip, because they each offer something very, very different. The Huntington in LA, amazing. So basically, when people ask me what are the best gardens to visit, my answer is any one you can get to. Oh, the other one, I got to the Meyer Gardens and Sculpture Park last year for about half a day in Michigan, which many people have told me about visiting, many of you. And I really wish I had figured out a way to carve out more time to be there. In fact, what's really funny is that Carol, who helps me out in my garden in summer, she averages about, usually it's 5 to 10 hours a week, depending on what's going on. If I've got like a big tour coming up, or it's just a really busy time, or she has some extra time, she'll spend some extra time here. But she's crucial to making this garden happen, certainly. And I'm very thankful that she's a part of it. We got together, a month ago or so, and we're just talking about the fact that she had been at Meyer Gardens a week before or a week after I was, and we did not talk about it. So she didn't know I was going over there. And she was like, she had this whole, when she was there, she's like, I need to tell Erin about coming to this garden. And so anyway, there you go. Long story short, just go visit gardens, because any garden, and I'm talking about private, public, worst case scenario, it's not really your style, and you walk around and you appreciate what it is for that gardener's style, and then you leave. But I can almost guarantee you're going to walk away with one thing that you go, I like it. Put that in your little catalog of things that you might someday need to do or want to do in your own garden. I get a lot of questions about jumping worms. I think it's because I feel like I'm one of the only gardening YouTube channels that talks about them at all, and I don't even talk about them that much, except to mention that I have them here. It's interesting to me. I cannot be alone. I know that a lot of other gardeners are dealing with these, and they're all over. They're in like 30, I confirmed, in 37 states or something now. One of the reasons perhaps and like I said, I have not done a full video on jumping worms. It's clearly on the list. I get enough questions about that I need to do it. But part of that reason is because there aren't a lot of answers right now. So the Wisconsin Arboretum and University of Wisconsin are kind of leading the charge on the research on jumping worms. So I keep up with what's happening there. There's no silver bullet's been found, and I think we're coming to the conclusion now that there's no silver bullet coming. We're gonna have to deal with them. We'll have to figure it out. And there's a lot of things that people try. So there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about them. There's a lot of things that people try. I would just say, if you deal with jumping worms, first of all, it's okay to have a little cry. I think it's worth having a little cry over it. And then you just, dust yourself off and you move on, because it's just it's one of these things we have to deal with our garden, and there's going to be a new one around the corner the next day. It's the same thing like emerald ash borer. We saw what that did, and we all cried about it, and we all lost a lot of trees, and now we move on and we come with what's next. And that's all you can really do with these horrible invasive things that enter our gardens. Sometimes there's not much you can do about it. If and when I make a jumping worms video, there's a couple of things that I will just say that are generally misunderstood, that are often talked about in the context of jumping worms. One is mustard pores. Mustard pores are a diagnostic tool. They are not a treatment tool. So a mustard pore, briefly here, you take ground mustard. I think it's 1/3 of a cup to a gallon, but double check all this. And you mix it up and you pour it over a small area in your garden. And what this will do is, mustard is an irritant, and so it will bring all of the worms in your garden to the surface quite rapidly. Within seconds you will see them. And so what happens is, you can then collect those worms, or you can analyze those worms, but you might as well collect them as long as they're there. And then you can get a feel for, am I dealing with jumping worms? Am I dealing with a different kind of earthworm? What's in my soil, so you can understand what kind of worms you have and what sort of populations you might be looking at. So the last time I did a mustard pour was 2 years ago, I think. I did about a 3-foot square area. I think I did 2 gallons or so of mustard. And within, because this is the thing with it, they come up really quick and you got to grab them because they go back down quick too. I collected in a matter of 3 minutes or something like that, something like 100 jumping worms in a 3-foot square area. So yeah, I got a jumping worm problem in that area, right? That confirmed what I was seeing from other things. So this is not how you get rid of them, because that would be, it's not, unless you have the tiniest little garden in the world, a tiny little patch on outside your house in a tiny little, area, this is not an effective way to manage them. So this is a diagnostic tool, not how you treat the problem. There's also a lot of talk about tea seed meal, which is something that was one of the early things that was talked about in terms of getting rid of them. Very mixed results, not a lot of real science behind that. And also tea seed meal is not good for waterways. So like for me, I did use tea seed meal once. I don't know that it made a difference. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. It without proper study, you don't know if it's making a difference. We all want to think it is because we spent the money and did the work. But then I learned that tea seed meal can be very, very bad for waterways. And since we've got this creek that drains right out to Lake Michigan, which is right there, I'm quite careful about what I use on my property. If anything can wash into a waterway and affect the larger ecosystem. So, jumping worms. look for scientific research, particularly from the University of Wisconsin. Brad Herrick is kind of the lead on this. It's probably where you're going to find the latest. They're very good about sharing the information as they get it. Be careful about going on the Facebook groups and just randomly doing something that somebody suggests, because it could cause damage, and you don't want to. You already have a problem on your hands. Let's not make it worse by causing other kinds of damage. And just hang in there. You know, you might have to adapt how you plant, and you might have to adapt how you think about things. And I feel your pain, and it stinks. It's just kind of one of those things that I think we just have to, it is what it is sort of thing. One of the questions I get a lot is, how do I design my garden spaces? Lucky for you, I am finishing up a video about just this topic. But I will tell you that I take two very different approaches. If I am creating a new area or adding on to an area that is where what I'm adding on is all new, that is a much different approach. That I take really careful measurements. I get out the graph paper. I work. Often I work off of a photo. Very helpful for me to work off of a photo, but also I just hand draw it on graph paper too, or I use my iPad program on my iPad, essentially the same thing. If I am fixing an existing area, I know that because there are existing plants, unless I'm doing a clean sweep, which I don't think I've ever done, I know there are plants I'm going to want to keep in that area. So for me, it makes more sense to do sort of rough layouts, rough concepts, because I know it's going to shift once I get in there and things are going to change a little bit. But I do need to get my thoughts on paper and get a rough idea of what I'm looking at and get at least a general plan going. So two very different approaches depending on what I'm trying to accomplish in my garden. Fixing a garden area that's not working is a much more casual thing than starting from scratch in a new garden area for me when it comes to my personal design process. When to start dahlias? That is a question I get quite often. I start my dahlias, I have in the past started my dahlias in about mid-March. I pot them up. People call this waking up your tubers, and people do it in different ways, and not everyone starts them by potting them up. Some people actually put them in like plastic bags in a sunny window with a little bit of soil. I didn't realize this whole waking up dahlia tubers was a thing until a couple of years ago. I'm like, what? It is what I was doing. I just didn't realize that's what people were calling it. That said, last year I brought my big containers of tubers into a warm area for about a week to 2 weeks before I actually pot them up, which I feel like it helped. I also feel like I was still slow last year, so I'm going to probably bump this. Gosh, that gets us close, doesn't it? I just realized we're already in February here. So I will probably do that at the end of February, bring those containers out and start warming these up. It's helpful to see, to get some eyes going and stuff, so you kind of know where you're at with your tubers. So it all depends on how you're going, but keep in mind, if you pot them up early, like I do, that is a lot of tending, because in my garden, dahlias don't go out until the first week of June, unless we're having some weird summer. But generally speaking, my dahlias don't get planted till the first or even second week of June. So if you're starting in March, April, May, June, I mean, you're talking 3 full months of tending these things. And that is why I move things out to a greenhouse to get them out there so they're getting plenty of light. It's a whole thing, folks. So keep in mind that if you don't want to do any of that, but you still want to grow dahlias, you can absolutely not do anything. And then come time to plant your tubers, you just plant your tubers directly in the ground when the ground is warm enough, which is 65 degrees ground temperature. So you can do that too. I also get a lot of questions about what plants, like favorite plants and whatever. I also get the question of what plants don't I grow? And I mean, I grow everything. I'll try anything. But I will tell you that the groups of plants that I lean away from are anything that emerges from the ground, gets a late start. This kind of goes back to our short gardening season. It is very hard for me to sit around and wait until July for a plant to come out of the ground. So some of the plants that I generally don't grow anymore are hardy hibiscus, which are extremely late to emerge. Buddleia, very late to emerge. There's a few other ones that I'm not like coming to mind right now. But anything that is one of those things to get a late start, for the most part, there's too many other plants to choose from, and I'm not going to deal with that hole in my garden until July because of that. So those are often on the chopping block for me, even if I enjoy those plants in other cases. To make it in, we have a huge variety of plants that we can choose from in our gardens. So I think we can be a little picky. At least I feel I can be picky. So a plant has to do more for me than just have a great flower. Like, listen, hardy hibiscus flowers are amazing and beautiful. I love seeing them in other gardens. They're a little gauche. I mean, they're so big. They're like, wow, in your face, which I don't mind. But they have to have something else going for them. That plant does not have interesting fall foliage. It doesn't have any, honestly, it has absolutely nothing going for it, in my opinion, other than that beautiful flower. If on top of that, you got nothing, you got no other boxes checked, and you're late to come into the garden, nope, sorry, I'm not interested. Now, you might say the same thing about dahlias. You're not wrong. Although some dahlias will flower far longer, far better, and make better cut flowers than those. So I would add all those into that. But it's just because I love dahlias. So if you love hardy hibiscus and you only need one box checked, that's fine. I'm just saying, when I get to ask the question, what plants don't I grow anymore? Those are the plants that I just say enough with, because it doesn't meet what I need for my own garden. All right, that's it, you guys. Those are some of the top questions, or the most common questions I get asked. Oh, in addition to where I got my botanical charts that are hanging in my kitchen, here's how you find those. They are German, I believe, vintage botanical charts. Go on to, I got mine on Etsy, go on to Etsy or eBay and search for, this is the Wisconsin pronunciation of this, which I'm guessing is the German pronunciation, but because Wisconsin has a large German immigrant population here. So we would say these names: Young Cock Cantel. It's Jungkoch, Cantel, Quentell. Search for that. Search for Young Cock Cantel vintage botanical charts, and I'm pretty sure you'll find them out there. Mine are starting to get really faded hanging up here on the wall. They're still great, but mine are starting to get quite faded there. I'm sure there's plenty out there to choose from, and they're weird and they're wild, and they do fill up a wall nicely, and I love them. So that is the question I get asked all the time. There also, by the way, is a book of these, which I own, and it's probably like, I don't know, it's probably like 11 inches wide by 14 tall, which you could absolutely, if you want to frame some, you could absolutely rip pages out of there and frame some, and they would be beautiful if you don't need a big piece of art. So you could also pick up that book. I assume it's on Amazon or something. Find that book and rip the pages out of it. Would be great art as well. All right, that's it, you guys. Thanks for watching. It's a little bit of a different take on our Sunday garden stroll. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for strolling. Thanks for sending questions. Have a great day in your garden. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.